to the August.
Yep.
Okay. I'm gonna go for it.
Hey guys, thanks for tuning in to another video on InRange TV. This will be our August question and answer session, and I have stolen the questions.
Okay.
Today I will read the questions.
Fair enough.
As always, these questions are provided by some of our awesome Patreon supporters. It's you guys who make this whole channel possible, so thank you very much. If you'd like to get your own questions in, check out the link below to patreon.com, and let's get into it. So, Jean says, Karl, during a competition, have you ever had your AK's front sight get caught in a barrier or obstacle? Have you considered removing the front sight to avoid this and relying on optical sights alone?
Yes, that's happened to me a number of times, specifically VTAC barricades and things like that.
They're good at that.
They are.
You should hack it off.
Yeah, well, people have said that because there's no reason you couldn't. There's nothing about the gas system or anything like that on the AK. I haven't considered doing that, honestly, because that's not that realistic a problem. And it is a problem in certain matches, but the reality is I don't want to modify the gun in that way. So I just kind of don't want to, I just don't want to full spindle mutilate my AK. So I have not considered cutting off the sight, although I would say that that's not the most unreasonable idea.
No.
If you, I mean, you trust your sighting system,
Yeah.
just like we trust the sighting system on our what Stone do rifles.
This is true.
I would say that I agree. There's no reason to necessarily have it on there anymore once you have a proper sighting system on your AK. But I also don't feel like cutting it off, so I just haven't.
Hey, technically, you don't have to cut it off. You can drive out the pins and just comes right off the barrel.
That's true.
But
That's a lot of work too.
I agree. It's the thing is, it's almost never an issue. It is occasionally an issue, but not enough to justify fixing.
I think the reason this comes up is you see it in competition when we're shooting VTAC barricades and stuff, and it kind of gets caught on there.
Yeah, but everything gets caught in those things.
Yeah, that's true.
Cutler says, Ian, do you think the AK ever had an open bolt format in its conceptual stages of development? I always thought it was strange the safety lever physically blocks the charging handle in typical submachine gun fashion. As far as I know, it did not ever have an open bolt iteration.
Okay.
I think what you're seeing there is really coincidence. The safety lever is intended to close that gap where the charging handle has to cycle.
It's a dust cover.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then the charging handle is located at the back end of the bolt instead of the front. In fact, I think it's a negative thing because I would prefer to be able to engage the safety and still cycle the action. You could put it on safe, take the mag out, rack it, pop the cartridge out of the chamber, and be good to go.
I think the concept behind that, though, was that on safe you couldn't accidentally chamber around.
Yeah,
But
I like that idea less.
yeah.
As for the question, no. As far as I know, and I only recently received these questions, so I haven't actually tried to go in and research it. I don't believe it ever had an open bolt.
I can't think of one either.
Yeah. Ed says, what would you rather carry, the Type 38 or the Type 99 Arisaka? The 38.
Yeah.
Now let's see if Karl has the right answer. Karl.
No, I think I'm there as well. The gun's first of all very quiet to shoot. Has very little recoil. It has a flat shooting cartridge.
Yep.
So I think the 38 actually would be preferable. The reason they went to that bigger bullet was they had this perception that they weren't getting what they needed on barrier penetration, I believe.
Yeah. I suspect it also had something to do with machine guns.
Yes.
Machine guns can make a lot better use of larger bullets. The recoil's not as important.
But yeah, between the two, I would take the 38.
Yeah. I think the 6.5 cartridge does everything very nicely.
I agree.
Molly says, you two seem quite enamored with the M1 Garand. What specifically makes it such an excellent rifle in your opinions? And if the Johnson light machine gun inspired the AR platforms, what would a modern rifle inspired by the Garand look like in your minds?
Ugh.
Oh, I can tell you exactly what a modern rifle inspired by the Garand would look like.
Okay.
An AK. The bolt, the gas piston,
That's a
and
good
the
answer.
fire control mechanism in the Garand and the AK are, by Kalashnikov's own admission, inspired by the M1 Garand.
Or the Mini 14 for that matter too, obviously.
Well, yeah.
Which is just a minimized. But you're right. The AK is the right answer, or is the best answer.
Yeah. Interestingly, the Garand was largely inspired by the French RSC 1917,
Yes.
where the bolt, the gas system, and the fire control mechanism are very similar between the two.
To answer the question as why we're enamored with it, or at least why I'm enamored with it, is because it was, well, first of all, it really was the first truly reliable mass-issued semi-automatic rifle. That not only did it come out and was reliable, very reliable, in mass numbers, the actual ergonomics of the gun is excellent.
Yeah.
The M-block clip loading system versus some stripper clip thing like on the G43 or 41, which sucks. The M-block is fantastic. It's fast. It really is. The sights are excellent.
Yep.
The gun balances well. The trigger's good. It's more than sufficiently accurate. everything about the M1 sort of got it right.
Yep.
There's things to do. It's an older design. You got exposed operation systems and all that kind of
A
stuff.
good way to mount an optic.
Yeah. But when
But
you
none
take
of
it,
that matters.
when you take it in context as an iron-sighted semi-automatic battle rifle,
In 1936.
it's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
And it still is good today.
Yep. Interestingly, I recently had a chance to play with a 1924 primer actuated Garand.
Yes.
And you know what? It handles great. The trigger's great. The sights are great. You can see, while the mechanism is completely different than the M1, you can see all the aspects of what Garand himself was looking for in a rifle.
His genius.
Yeah,
And he pulled it off with the M1.
totally.
That's what it is. That's why.
Jacob says, Karl, what firearms do you recommend for someone looking to get into cowboy firearms? Also, what companies produce the best reproductions?
They're all made by the same people.
Not quite, but mostly.
Closely. I mean, for the most part, almost everything's a birdie.
So what's kind of funny is in Italy, where these are all made, it's the Val Trompia, the Trompia Valley, and it's this like 20-mile long valley that just kind of climbs up into the mountains, and it's nothing but gun companies.
Yes.
Like little shops, big shops, Beretta's at one end of it, Uberti's in there, Pietta's in there, all of these guys are in there, and yeah, I think a lot of them source their parts from the same people.
Pretty much when you're talking about cowboy action reproductions in the United States, you're dealing with stuff that's not a reproduction, like the Ruger stuff, which is not a reproduction. It's a modern gun that looks like it. And when you want something that's actually a design, original design, that's just a reproduction, it's Uberti and Pietta.
Yeah.
And there's a couple. I mean, there's what's the other one? Pedersoli.
Yeah.
But those are not, they don't really deal with a lot of the pistols that much. Pedersoli is expensive. So when you go to and you look at different importers like Cimarron or Taylor and Co., you're getting an Uberti gun, or probably, or a Pietta. And some of them do more quality control check over the gun than others. It's been my experience, just my experience. Taylor and Company seems to have a little better quality control, and their customer service is a little better than Cimarron.
Okay.
But the reality is these guns come from the same places, and it's sort of ironic and weird that all these quintessentially iconic American guns are all coming from Italy. We don't make them here anymore. I mean, Colt makes them if you want to spend an arm and a leg on a single action army, which is not, by the way, still not the original because they have lawyers involved. They don't have the proper firing pin and the hammer, for example. So to get a real reproduction, you're going to these Italian companies.
Yeah.
Either-
Which isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Oh no, they make fantastic guns. But if I were to ask about who I would prefer to purchase one from, I would prefer Taylor and Company. But there's nothing wrong with Cimarron either,
Okay.
or any of the others.
And the guns you would want would be a Schofield and a Winchester 73.
If I had to choose only two, those would be the two that I would pick. Yeah, absolutely.
All right. Brandon says, in video of my rifle at IDARM, Independence Day Action Rifle Match in Phoenix, I noticed that my rifle spat out vast amounts of sand at one point, but never had any issues. Have you ever experienced any issues or stoppages at a match due to environment? Yeah.
Yeah, of
Like
course we
every
have.
time I bring an Enfield.
Yeah, your Enfields fail every freaking time.
They do. It's true. Never had a problem with our what would Stoner do rifles.
No.
We don't normally have issues at two gun.
I'm trying to think. The Enfield is what strikes me as the one that's most consistently had a problem.
Yeah. Most of the time, to be honest, when you see people who have stoppages at a match, it's because they're using hand-loaded ammo that sucks.
That's true.
My immediate reaction when I see someone and they have, especially an AR, and it goes click, I'm like, oh, hand loads.
And it's 90% of the,
Yeah.
95% of the time correct.
Jams on feeding, like, oh, hand loads. Maybe if this person who has had malfunctions for the last 4 matches, maybe if they just bought factory ammo, all of that would go away.
That's true. But in terms of actual dirt, debris, dust problems, the only one I could think of was the Enfield.
We must have had them on something else, but
So the answer is yes, but not often.
yeah.
Yeah.
And I think it's really just because in 4 stages at 90 to 150 seconds per stage, we just don't have that much time to accumulate the amount of dirt that would be required to cause a real problem.
Fair.
And we don't tend to use the same guns over and over and over without cleaning them, thus we're not letting anything accumulate a lot of dirt.
Also fair.
Aaron says, do you have any plans to mud test the M27 IAR? It's your gun. What do you think?
No plans, but why not? I guess the reason it really wasn't on the radar is because it's another AR variant.
Yeah, we've done 4.
I don't know how many ARs we need to mud test for people to believe that ARs work. I mean, the M27 being a piston gun versus a DI gun, I guess that maybe. Well, the DI gun, you remember on the high speed, it was blowing dirt and debris out of the action by venting.
It's not going to make a difference.
I don't think it's going to make a difference, but let's say this. Yes, we'll do it at some point. We haven't done it yet.
And Karl gets to clean the mud out of the Picatinny rails.
Ooh. Yeah, that's the worst part. The big rails are bad.
All right. Nick says, this will get buried.
Apparently not.
Is there any central place to find where you post every new video? Yes, inrange.tv.
Well, not really. InRange.tv presents the links for all 5 distribution networks. What he's
That's
asking
true.
for is a place where it shows every video that gets posted new. Well, no, not really. I hate to say this, but the reality is the 2 places where you're always definitely going to see the most current video is YouTube.
Yep. And Full 30.
No, not Full 30.
No.
YouTube.
Oh, Full 30's been having some processing issues.
The places where you're always going to find the most current episode is for sure, without an issue, is YouTube and Facebook.
Okay.
Because their systems are reliable, and when you upload the content, it actually publishes and schedules properly. Full 30 has been having a lot of technological issues. BitChute works 90% of the time. Pornhub is problematic. It gets the videos when it can. So the ones, if you want the most reliable feed for InRange, and I hate to say it, but it's the truth, YouTube or Facebook.
All right. There's a reason that they are the big players
There is.
for their work.
No, it's true.
Ian, who is not me, says, given the accuracy something like a K31 rifle achieves, why is it you don't see more precision straight pull rifles in the USA? And are there any governments using the action type in their issued sniper rifles? The answer is no. And the reason is because a straight pull doesn't actually convey any real benefit to a rifle. It's not
Well, in
actually
theory, it
faster.
cycles faster,
In theory, but in reality, it doesn't.
and it's a more complicated system.
It's going to be more expensive to make. It doesn't actually provide any tangible benefit. Even if they did provide a speed benefit, that doesn't matter in a precision rifle.
It doesn't. That's true.
And yeah, but they don't, which is why you didn't see anyone after the Swiss, other than the Swiss, you saw no one after like 1895 adopt a straight pull because they're more expensive and they don't give you any benefit.
That, and I'm going to argue, and this will always get flack, the reality is we're moving further and further away from bolt-action rifles, and these will become more and more
absolutely.
semi-automatic, and therefore, even if there was an advantage to a straight pull, it would be irrelevant.
Yeah. Next page. Cody has a link to a Wired.com story about the plea deal or the resolution of crap. I've lost the guy's name.
Cody Wilson's.
Cody Wilson's. Yes, 3D printing extravaganza. It says court ruled in favor of a man posting data to 3D print firearms online. This seems to be right up InRange's alley, and I'd like to know how you think this will affect future gun ownership and digital rights. Before you start, I would like to point out that I'm pretty sure that nothing the State Department did prevented Cody Wilson's 3D printed Liberator plans from being easily accessible on the internet.
Yeah, they can't stop that.
No.
You literally can't stop the signal.
They could prosecute him if he posted them, but once they're out on BitTorrent, which they were, they're everywhere and ain't nothing you're going to do to stop it.
That's true. You can't control the internet in that way.
Yeah.
So you're right. They could have never stopped it. But now what this is saying is that it wasn't illegal.
Correct. And other people can do it. Basically, it's really just like the crypto wars that you were in,
It was.
except instead of it being the source code to PGP, it's the source code to 3D print a pistol,
Yep.
and it's protected speech, and it's no longer regulated by ITAR. Honestly, I don't think this will change much. I think what it will do, had it gone the other way, it would have changed things.
I agree.
This will simply acknowledge the status quo as legally acceptable.
This was the right decision
Yeah.
because of what we're dealing with here. And so therefore, since it was the right decision, it does not impact anything. It did not make the situation worse.
Right.
If it had gone the opposite direction, as you said, it would have made the situation worse.
Definitely would have made the situation worse for Cody Wilson. He is much better off now, not being prosecuted by the State Department.
How does this affect future gun ownership? Not dramatically yet, but what this does mean is that the future of 3D printing and designs as 3D printing becomes more technologically capable than it currently is.
When it's metal and not polymer.
We talked about this before.
Yep.
This is the 3D printing will become the Gutenberg press of
Yes.
firearms.
And everything else.
And it will become a very significant issue in terms of gun control.
Yeah.
The governments are going to lose control of the ability to regulate and restrict firearms. What they will probably then focus on, ammunition, components.
I thought you were going to say 3D printing machines, but
no.
that's hopeless too.
Let me go there. ammunition,
Yeah.
powder, projectiles.
Yeah, primers.
That's where that's a whole other problem.
Yeah.
Because this 3D printed guns rely on the ability to get ammunition and propellant. The other thing that will happen, and this has already started to happen, 3D printers will have certain types of DRM or controls, and that when they see certain types of plans being printed, they won't work.
Yeah, that's not.
It'll get
not
hacked.
Sustainable. That'll get hacked 5 seconds after it's introduced.
But you'll see more of it.
Okay. As a futile attempt to grab regulatory control.
Correct.
Philip says, how do you co-witness your red dot on the H9? Have read some different variants on how to do this. It seems that co-witness isn't the same for everybody.
I don't worry about it.
Yeah, you don't need to co-witness a red dot on a pistol.
In theory, well,
I guess you could.
what I do is I like to do handoff. So when I fire a red dot enhanced pistol, I take an iron sight picture first and then see the dot. It just helps me acquire the dot faster. The dot doesn't have to be necessarily superimposed as a traditional co-witness over the iron sights on the gun. If they are both zeroed the same way, they will be, but I don't really care if they are or are not. So what I do with a red dot pistol, which is different than what I would do on a rifle, is I zero the irons till it's hitting where I want them to, and then I zero the dot where it's hitting where I want it to, and let the great magnet decide the rest.
Okay. Peter says, why isn't the ZH29 style of front magazine catch used in more weapons? It seems like a simple upgrade for a rock-in magazine design. That would be because it is overly complicated and unnecessary.
Okay.
It has 2 magazine catches, one in the front.
Oh, yes, of course.
The BM59 also does that.
It does.
And like nothing else that I can think of offhand. You don't need it.
It's a lot of extra parts and complexity and cost for no real practical advantage.
Yeah. In fact, I don't think it really conveys any practical advantage. You don't see magazines falling out of AKs or...
No.
Yeah. Karl, who is not you, says, can you, to the best of your knowledge, explain the history of the armsen OEG and similar operating sites? What is the common name for sites that operate on that principle? And are there some recommendations for popular models if I wanted to collect or try one? I can answer a couple of these. Mm-hmm. The common name for sights that operate on this principle is OEG. That actually stands for occluded eye gun sight, meaning you're not actually seeing through the sight. If you want to get one today, your best option is armsen, because they still make them and they still sell them, and they're actually really cheap.
I can't
like $120 or something.
I can't believe they're still selling those things. How is there a market for that?
I think the South African military still uses them on grenade launchers.
Oh my God. Okay.
Beyond that,
I hate the freaking things. I don't get it.
Keep in mind that the one you tried was from the 70s. And it might not work as well as a modern one.
It's still the Binden concept.
Or you might just be broken.
That's probably it. But it's still the Binden concept in which you look, your one eye superimposes one image on top of the other eye's image.
Yeah.
I find that to be a very difficult thing. Some people find it easier than others. I have a real hard time with it.
Okay.
And so I would not recommend those for anything other than the trash.
I think they're kind of fun. They're definitely not as good as any modern optic, any optic with lenses. But they are cheap and they're kind of neat. So if you want one, armsen. We won't post a link because YouTube will get angry. If
You know what else is kind of like that? Sort of? Ish? No, it's not. I was going to say the see-all, but it's not. Because you kind of look at the see-all just soup. No.
What's like that is taking your ACOG and putting the lens cap on.
You can do that.
And then you've got the exact same thing.
If you take an ACOG and put a lens cap on it, you'll get the Binden concept out of that. In fact, some people have done that to accelerate their use of their ACOG in close quarters, because by putting a lens cap on front of the ACOG, you just get the reticle or the chevron. Your eye does not perceive magnification because it's just black. So all you have is chevron plus other eyeball. So you can Binden concept with an ACOG as well.
Yeah. Where you couldn't really do it with a 4x in one eye and a 0x in the other.
It's very difficult.
John says, hey guys, what is the best piece of firearms advice you've ever received? I should have reread these questions sooner because I have no idea.
I said this in the last Q&A. I would say the training course of South Narc's ECQC course.
Okay.
That course is, I say it a lot, but that course really is a paradigm shift for the individual. So I think that's the best advice I could ever say, is to seek out that course.
All right.
Yeah.
Michael says, hi Karl, Ian. I would like to know your thoughts on the AR-10. I recently purchased one, my first battle rifle. I find the ergonomics quite left-hand friendly after adding an ambidextrous charging handle and safety. You would, because the AR is a very nice ambidextrous platform, especially after you add charging handle and a safety. I like the AR-10. They're neat. To me, where the AR really shines is in 5.56. But even then, I guess of the .308 caliber combat rifles, it's hard to argue against the AR-10.
It is. The problem is a lot of them have been, unfortunately, there's been the reproductions that have been unreliable because of poor manufacturing.
True. You don't really get military parts kit AR-10s as a general rule.
But if you can get an AR-10 system from anybody that's reliable, then I have nothing against the AR-10 if you want 308.
Yeah, it's going to be more accurate than most of the other options.
Yes, it will.
It's going to have a good balance of ergonomics, accuracy, optics compatibility.
Like you mean like an AR?
Yeah, exactly. But bigger.
Yeah, but bigger.
Yeah. Matthew, another repeat question. Can we see a What Would Stoner Do mud test?
We've done 4 ARs. We have a request in the last one to do the M27 IAR.
You've now promised 5 AR mud tests.
And I guess I don't understand how many ARs need to be tested.
All of them, apparently.
And I don't know how the What Would Stoner Do build is any different than any other AR in terms of its functional capabilities, in terms of it resisting mud, but I guess we have to because it keeps coming up.
We'll probably pull that off at some point.
This question comes up constantly.
Yeah.
So until we do it, we're never going to see the end of the question. So I think the answer is yes, because that will help stop the question.
That's a good reason to do it as any.
Yes.
All right. Jacob says, why do we continue to see non-aperture iron sights on combat rifles after the P14? Is there some benefit to leaf sights? Some benefit that leaf sights offer that explains why they can be still found on some modern production rifles like the AK series. We'll point out the AK series now actually comes with an aperture sight on the rear end of the rail that is permanently mounted to the dust cover, which is pinned to the receiver.
The most modern one. The most modern one, they finally relented.
Yeah.
And went to an aperture sight.
Yeah.
I believe that there is no defense. There is no defensible reason to say that a leaf sight is better than an aperture. The aperture is better in every way.
There is an interesting question as to why it stayed that way for so long. I can see it on the AK.
Inertia.
Because of the mechanics of that rear dust cover.
Inertia.
But there were a lot of bolt action rifles that could have, but didn't.
Inertia.
Okay. You even see some weird ones like the Madsen 58 where they used an aperture sight in front of the chamber.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But I don't know why people get stuck on bad ideas. That's essentially what you're asking.
It certainly does seem to happen.
And it happens a lot, not just in guns. And while the leaf sight is certainly not useless, the aperture sight was a definite advantage and benefit. And we're even finally seeing that on the AK. So I think that was just the world stuck on a bad idea.
Okay. Charles says, what do you guys think about the rapid decline of the popularity of the .40 Smith & Wesson? Was its popularity in the first place well-deserved? Is it likely to see a resurgence?
I think its popularity was based on the FBI adaptation, right, and law enforcement using it. Well, FBI went 10 millimeter initially, but I think it was just as simple as law enforcement went, huh, and went for it, and then everybody goes, huh, we need that now too. You see the same thing with military stuff. Military adopts something, everyone has to have it. Every civilian wants one, right? Civilian, but
why would you not want the size of a 9 millimeter and the capacity of a 45?
Well, when
in a cartridge that's higher pressure than either of those frames are designed for.
When 10 millimeter came out, 10 millimeter had a point. Now, the problem with 10 millimeter is it was very hard to train with and become proficient with because of the recoil.
Yeah.
And so then they went to 10 millimeter short, otherwise known as .40 Smith & Wesson.
Yep.
And that then took away all the benefits of 10 millimeter. And it was at that moment they should have said, why are we doing this? And they should have done something else.
Yeah.
But they didn't. Now, one could argue is that when that decision was made that the advancements in projectile technology that came with 9mm hadn't happened yet.
That's an arguable point.
But that's no longer the case. And so what you could do with projectiles now mitigates any possible advantage that .40 Smith & Wesson ever brought to the table.
Yeah.
And I think it's become an obsolescent cartridge.
Yeah. And it doesn't, because it never took off as much, you don't have the manufacturing support, and the ammo is more expensive. A lot more. If .40 Smith & Wesson could be purchased for the same price as 9, I think we'd see a lot more people using it.
True.
A lot more people would be taking advantage of those like $280 police trade-in GWACS in .40.
It's true.
But you look at that and you go, oh, but my ammo is going to cost 2.5 times as much, or whatever it comes out to. So it's actually false economy, and I don't want a .40 Smith & Wesson Glock.
Agreed.
That'll blow up.
Correct. Blow up?
Oops, did I say that?
You didn't say that. You didn't hear that.
It may be a remarkably high-pressure cartridge.
It could be.
It is also probably not as dumb as 40 gap, or 45 gap.
Oh, no, 45 gap was...
That's a really bad idea.
That was a really bad idea.
Matt says, Karl, Ian, have either of you played with the Walther P99/PPQ M1? I am fond of mine, what with how ambidextrous they are. Nope, I've never touched one.
I have. I shot the P99 extensively. This maybe came before in range quite a bit, but I used it as my competition gun for quite a while. I agree with you on the ambidextrous handling. I think that the gun is really well designed in that regard. I think the gun handles well in your hand. I think the mag release system is fantastic. I think the decocking system on the original P99 was really good. I think the trigger was decent for what it was. I think the reality was, though, is that it's not that accurate a gun. At least it wasn't for me. I found that it was actually holding me back on my scores. And when I switched to a different gun that was intrinsically more accurate, I did better. So that was the reason I moved away from it. However, in terms of its handling capabilities and the gun's reliability and its ergonomics, I think the P99 is phenomenal. So I would like to see more of that, but it didn't. P99 just didn't quite make the cut.
We'd also like to see the HK-P7 modernized and updated and reevaluated and introduced.
Absolutely.
Jordan says, best rifles that aren't an AR-15. AK-74. They're really good.
Yeah. I have a hard time answering that question besides that. Yeah. If you're going to go with something that is at least close to performance functionality of an AR-15, the things that come to mind, the Scarlight,
Okay.
that's good. The AK-74, especially modernized. Yeah.
Some of the AR-18 derivatives, but you don't see very many of those in the U.S. civilian market. They're much more military issue rifles.
Yep. So I would go with the Scarlight or the AK, just like you said.
Brian, what are your thoughts on handguards with integrated bipods as far as weight and utility versus complexity and practicality? I think
This is a good one for you because
FAMAS. There are a limited number of rifles that have them, and most of the ones that do, from military rifles, are ones that are select fire, where the bipod is there so that you can kind of make the thing into a pseudo light machine gun if you need to.
Yeah.
The G3, the FAL, primarily. The AR-10 originally was offered, you could get it with a bipod, and there are a few out there floating around with bipods. In those situations, you generally weren't looking at a gun where the bipod was actually free-floated. So its utility is going to be much better as a machine gun where you're kind of aiming by bullet impact, because it's probably going to change your point of impact from where your sights are zeroed. The M59 also.
Yes.
I mean, a lot of those 308 battle rifle versions have integrated bipods. As far as 5.56, most people went and got rid of that. I think because they didn't really expect a 5.56 to serve as like an interim light machine gun sort of role. The FAMAS is one of the exceptions, and the FAMAS also is an exception in that it is a free-floated bipod, and I think it's really quite handy.
It's exceptionally well done.
It's light, they don't get in the way, they're not adjustable, which limits them a bit, but I think overall what you get is absolutely worth the penalty, which is really quite minor.
I think in competition circles, you see the bipod that gets attached and detached from some kind of QD system, and I think that that's a far better answer. And I think the reality is, you already answered this, the reason for having the integrated bipod was for using it in an ersatz machine gun role, which is no longer the case for these rifles. They're not considered for that. And so in my opinion, I would say that while I agree with you having graded that the FAMAS did a good job of it, I would say that I would not want an integrated bipod because I don't want the weight on the gun if I don't need it.
Okay.
And the need for the bipod is when you need a bipod. Sporadic and rare.
Okay.
So I wouldn't want it.
All right. Dean says, new to Patreon, and I haven't watched all of the Q&As, so forgive me if this has been asked and answered. What is your take on the grip pod?
Hate it. I hate the grip pod.
Karl hates them.
The grip pod came up quite a bit during the What Was Done to Do project, and I tried using a grip pod, never on in range. This is sort of pre in range. I had multiple different variants of the grip pod, and the grip pod turned out to be neither a good pod, neither a good grip, nor a good bipod. It was just bad at everything. It was long. You had this big old thing hanging off your gun, which was just in the way. Then there was this button that you could accidentally press, and suddenly, ka-chunk, you got this thing that pops out the bottom, which then is supposed to be a bipod, which is never stable.
A very good bipod.
It's wobbly. It doesn't. They pivot, and it was not good at any of the things it was supposed to do besides being a big thing on the gun.
And it only had 2 jobs.
And it failed. It failed at both. So I think the grip pod is unfortunately bad.
All right. David says, did you ever get in touch with Franklin Armory? And if so, when are we going to see some Reformation run and gun? That's a good question, Karl.
I was in contact with them. I emailed them. They emailed me back saying that they would contact us when they were ready to provide a gun.
Interesting question. Has anyone actually seen them provide one of the guns with that special football ammo?
So they specifically did say that they would be willing to provide one when they were ready.
I'm not sure they're ready yet, actually.
I don't know if they'll ever be ready.
I don't know if they ever intended to be.
I don't know if that gun's ever going to be on the market.
They got an awful lot of nice publicity for not a whole lot of work or cost.
Correct.
And they're never going to sell those insanely stupid things, so...
The answer is, if they come out and we can get one, I would absolutely be curious and want to do a running gun with it. I would be curious to see how well those little footballs work. I would want to try it. And that was my email to them. I want to hit this with an open mind.
Yeah.
It's a weird idea. Fine. Let's try it. Let's put it on the clock. Let's see what our scores look like. Can we hit a target at 200 yards with this thing? That's what I'd want to try. They said they would provide one when they were ready. They have so far not replied beyond that.
I should point out that while I obviously have a prejudice and a preset opinion of how I expect this thing to perform, there are few things that I enjoy more than getting out in the field and having my hypothesis actually proven wrong.
True.
It's
Fair.
happened a number of times.
It has.
And the fact that I have a preset opinion does not mean in any way that I'm not open to it being changed.
So we would absolutely try it.
I would love to shoot one of those things.
If we can get one.
Because it'll be fun to be wrong and have it actually work well, and it'll be kind of, I'll really revel in it. If it is as bad as I expect it to be, that'll be fun too. So either way.
Either outcome would be entertaining.
Yeah. Matt says, Karl, you've stated that you'd take a modern lever gun in 357 mag. Why 357 instead of other revolver calibers like 44 mag or 500 S&W?
Because you don't need that power, and you can stay with 357 Magnum. You can stay with what I consider the high-speed lever guns, like the 1873 design, which is a toggle. Mm-hmm. And when you start getting into 44 mag, you can do it. But the reality is the toggle really handles 357 Magnum well. Mm-hmm. The other thing 357 Magnum does well from a revolver cartridge perspective is it shoots relatively flat and fast, which you're not getting from 44 Magnum or 500 Smith & Wesson in terms of ballistic arc or trajectory. And I think that is an advantage in terms of getting hits at range. So I think N357 Magnum is sufficient. So I don't see a reason to do bigger, and it allows you to use the high-speed actions like the 73.
And you can buy a complete loaded magazine worth of 357 for the cost of one 500 Smith & Wesson cartridge.
Also true.
I find these to be an important aspect to consider with questions like this. 3Lock says, in competition, I see people, including myself, getting called out in a friendly way about doing stuff that in-range TV advocates. How much influence do you think you're having on modern multi-gun competition? This is a hard question to answer from the inside.
It's hard to answer it because it requires, if you answer that you're getting, if you're saying you're having a lot, then you sound like an arrogant person. And I don't think we are having a lot. I think we're having some.
I think a little bit.
I think the two-gun thing is.
Yeah.
The two-gun match designs, not in-range in particular, but the stuff that in-range shows on the channel in terms of two-gun, such as the kettlebell stuff, the emphasis on physicality plus competition shooting. Mm-hmm. I think that we're seeing, I don't know that in-range is the cause of that. It could be a contributor thereof, but I think we're seeing that as a movement.
I would really like to hope so.
And I'd like to think that in-range has had some part of that, but I don't know how much. So I can't answer that question, but I do have seen a growing trend of that mindset, and that I think is a good thing.
And no matter how much we may or may not have had, it's not going to stop us from continuing to push that perspective and try and get more people to do it and do it better.
Correct.
Ethan says, do binary triggers have any use in two-gun?
No, binary triggers have no purpose on this earth.
All right. Matt says, I agree, by the way. Matt says, would you guys still like to check out an Ohio Ordnance Works Heavy counter-assault rifle? If so, let me know and we can schedule it.
We've wanted to forever.
I'll be right back. I need to go email this person.
Yeah, because we've been wanting to do this for a long time.
The Heavy counter-assault rifle is maybe not, that's kind of a cringy name for it, but it's a modernized, lightened BAR. And yes, I would love to do some shooting.
We have had a couple times now where we were supposed to get our hands on one of those to do that.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff kind of fizzles.
And we'll run it in the two-gun match and do the whole thing with it. It'd be fun to do that versus like the FG42.
Awesome.
The modernized FG42. Yes. That would be a great comparison.
Yes.
And that's been on the list, and we've never been able to acquire one.
You should be aware, Matt, that if you do loan it to us, there is a substantial chance that I will make every effort to buy it from you instead of return it.
But do we want to borrow one? Yes.
Yes. We will be in touch.
Yes.
David says, in the What Would Stoner Do, a lot of emphasis was put on being as lightweight as possible. With Karl's alpha gun, he ended up with an unwieldy, heavy beast. Then in Hard as Hell, Karl slimmed down that rifle, although it's heavier than the Stoner.
Yes.
What weight range do you all think is good for practical rifle use? Please discuss weight and balance as a part of getting the rifle just right to make most Goldilocks happy for good handling in diverse situations.
What happened to that accent? Where did that come from?
The word y'all.
Oh,
here,
that spun you
was
into
just
that.
the end of it.
All right,
Yeah.
I spun you into that. Okay.
So,
what's the best weight?
Honestly, I think the best weight is 1 ounce, but you always have to have it strong enough to survive basic rugged gun handling.
The lightest weight possible.
Yeah.
Absolutely the lightest weight
You
possible.
cannot have, given that, assuming that a rifle is durable and reliable, to given whatever standard you set, it cannot be too light.
Yep.
Unless, well, in 5.56 it can't be too light.
Agreed.
If it's in 300 Lapua,
Yeah.
it can be too light.
Yes.
Yeah.
So the answer is there is no such thing as too light of a 5.56 cartridge rifle.
There's too flimsy, but there's not too light.
Got it.
They may often go together, but they're not the same thing.
Agreed.
Reese says, with your alternative history lever gun project, doesn't the lack of training for the average cavalry troop on the frontier negate a lot of the advantages of the combined arm concept, in that troopers can't effectively employ it?
Well, yeah, but they couldn't effectively employ what they had either. I mean, that's neither here nor there. The lack of training is a terrible reality of the situation, and that doesn't mitigate the problem that they had then or if this. So I do not think that has merit. I don't think that concern applies in the what-if lever gun project. What we're trying to figure out there aren't the problems that the U.S. government military had with their training or their supply chain. What we're trying to determine is, of the mechanical designs that were technically available at the time, which ones could have been applied in a better, more tactical role that were not.
Yep, exactly.
Yeah.
Gory says, do either of you see any utility in more modern versions of the M60? The more modern versions of the M60?
I've shot a number of them. I don't.
My understanding is like the E6 is a pretty darn good machine gun.
Well, it probably is, because it's had so much development time. But when you compare that to other things that are now out on the field, like the 240 Bravo, do you still want to futz with an M60?
Well, that E6 is a lot lighter than a 240.
Yeah, it is.
So I don't know. I've had almost no experience on the M60. A little bit of shooting years ago on an early pattern one. It'd be really interesting to get out there with something like an E6 and find out.
I guess one could say that it's had so much time in development that there's potential there. But I guess I can't answer that beyond that.
Development time goes a long way in fixing problems.
You can take a really bad gun and with enough time make it okay.
Yeah.
And I think that's where that's going.
85.
Yeah. Well,
A3 now.
Yeah.
William says, now that you have broken GWACS, what would you substitute for lowers now that it's going to be some time before they redo the molds? I was thinking a Brownell's retro lower with an A1 stock. I would say wait for GWACS to come back online. Because I don't think it'll be all that long before they are.
I don't think it changed. Yeah, it's hard to want to recommend that. First of all, the A1 stock kind of gets you closer.
Yeah.
But there was something about using the more modern materials of the polymer that really makes the whole concept pop.
Yeah.
And so there's not one I can think of. Now, if you wanted, the upper makes a huge difference. If you're going to go with the pencil barrel and the the carbon fiber float tube and all the stuff that we did besides the lower, including the trigger system and all that,
You're going to be pretty close on
you're going to be close. You're going to be close. But I hesitate to say that that's the equivalent.
We're not willing to sacrifice our standards, even if the parts are completely unavailable.
Yes.
Which hopefully they won't be for much longer.
That's the goal.
Next page. Mitchell says, for your What Would Stoner Do builds, this is popular this time.
Yeah, it is.
You were both limited to 14.5 inch with a pin flash hider for the shortest legal non-SBR barrel length. If those legal limitations did not exist, would you have gone for a shorter barrel?
No, probably not.
Okay.
14.5 inch is kind of a sweet spot for velocity.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, there are places in which I could have seen putting one together at 10.5 inch or something like that. This is another instance in which DI gets weird.
Yeah.
Once you get below that 14.5 inch barrel length, that's when DI starts getting really strange. So the 14.5 inch length, as I understand it, was actually where they found the gun to remain reliable. Had nothing to do with velocity, but it also happens to also have something to do with velocity. So once you get below that, you start getting this diminishing return of reliability in a DI gun. So I don't think I would have.
And he says, for making the gun lighter and more maneuverable, it's pretty darn light maneuverable.
You can already one arm this thing like a pistol.
Yeah.
Yeah. So no.
Pandy says, For your what would Kalashnikov do, you mentioned in Hard as Hell 2 Gun that the ammo selection is pretty crap. I would agree, quality 5.45 is hard to get in the US. Have you considered looking into an AK in 5.56 as part of its evolution? The action and system of the AK-74 is untouched, but you get quality ammo.
I have one. I have a SBR like crank, AK-74 SU sort of thing in 5.56, and it's fine. But no, I didn't, because if I was going to go with a dedicated, I have that because it's an interesting gun. But in terms of modernizing the AK, in terms of what I wanted to do, I don't see that as just doesn't seem like it's. If I'm going 5.56, I'm going AR. Okay. And with the exception of the one that I own. So
let's also consider you won that gun for free.
I did.
So you had that gun to work with.
That's a good point. The one that you saw both in the Alpha build and the what would Kalashnikov do elements of Hard as Hell was the rifle that I won at the very first Red October match when I won the light division.
Yeah.
So that that sort of dictated it a little bit too.
All right. Antti. He appears to be Finnish. Have either of you fine gentlemen handled or fired a double-stack 45 styled firearms, such as the legendary para-ordnance P14, and what is your opinion of them?
I despise them.
I have not. So
para-ordnance is...
The joke that I've heard is the Latin translation of para-ordnance. Mm-hmm. It's like something that resembles a weapon. Para is like similar to.
Yeah, I have not seen a para-ordnance. No offense to anyone out in the audience that likes their gun, but I've never seen a para-ordnance gun that was reliable. And there's something about that fat double-stacked thing that just, it's ugly.
Perhaps consider a CZ97 or a 9mm.
Or converting to 9mm. That would be my answer to that.
Glenn says, what strategies have you employed to mitigate extreme handguard temperatures when competing in the Arizona sun?
Gloves, screaming, and shade. And carbon fiber. Yeah, we said that at the same time.
Yes, we did.
The carbon fiber actually does a very good job. There's also you can wrap heat wraps on it. Sinister Rifleman actually has a heat wrap thing that he did a while back. But reality, gloves, shade, carbon fiber has been the best answers we've found.
Yep. You want the gloves anyway for all the other parts of the gun, too.
You do. Oh,
magazines? Holy crap.
And not black.
Not black helps. Yeah. Andrew says, Karl, have you determined the cause of the malfunctions you had with your H9 at Hard as Hell 2 Gun?
No. There weren't a lot of them. There was a couple times in which I had to beat the slide in the battery. Couldn't tell if it was ammunition or not. It happened at that match in particular. It hasn't happened at other matches. It hasn't happened in other environments. And it hasn't happened since.
I had problems with my Glock at Hard as Hell.
You did. Yeah. So there were a couple stages in which they had to, the audience sees me hitting the gun in the battery. It hasn't happened more since, and it hasn't been a problem that's consistently happened enough for me to try and diagnose it. So I do not have an answer as to what was going on at Hard as Hell. Besides that, it was hard as hell, and I was on the clock, and that's how things work.
Having seen the videos, I would say it was a lack of elan and morale.
Probably that too. There was a lot of that going on.
Daniel says, any news on doing Tiger Valley again?
Yes, but not with you.
This one makes me sad.
Yeah. You're going to be somewhere.
So the problem is Hard as Hell takes place while I am...
No, Tiger Valley.
I'm sorry, Tiger Valley is happening at the same time as the 100th centenary of World War I. Yep. Tiger Valley is going to happen every year, and World War I is only going to be 100 years ago once. So I will be in Europe, sadly.
However, I am going to Tiger Valley, and this will be an instance in which, if you watch the Hard as Hell 2 Gun series, the most recent one for 2018, Sinister Rifleman was my co-host for that one. He will be there at Tiger Valley with me, and we're going to do a unique approach to it. We're both going to bring SBRs. He's bringing an SBR AR, and I'm bringing my AK-74 SU, and we're going to try and run the match, seeing that the target presentations of that match tend to be within the realm of those SBRs, and how much does the convenience of having such a small little gun matter in that very dynamic environment.
The interesting thing was in most competitions, you can't really get the benefit of a short-barreled carbine.
No.
You know, the whole reason that militaries often have those is compactness for getting in and out of vehicles and dealing with obstacles, and long guns are obnoxious. Most competitions, you're never in a position where the long guns matter problem because the competition's designed around that gun. Yep. Well, Tiger Valley is perhaps to a greater extent than any other competition that we've done, and so it seems like an interesting idea to see, can you actually get some practical benefit out of having a little shorty rifle?
Yep, and I'm going risky with the 74 SU and the Obzor.
All right.
So it should be an interesting video series.
Haven't learned your lesson yet, have you?
Should be an interesting video series.
All right, almost down to the end here. Michael says, will there be a Desert Brutality 2019?
Don't know yet.
We don't know yet.
I still haven't started moving on that.
Mike says, at what point does a rifle stop being practical and become a gamer gun?
When it becomes unreliable based on the things you've done to it.
It's a pretty easy definition.
I think that is it. It's like when you see people skeletonize stuff and then dirt can get in, you now have a gamer gun.
Yeah.
If you've modified it to the point where the gas system is so barely functioning that it only works with your hand loads, you now have a gamer gun. If you do things to improve a gun that still retains the general durability and reliability of the gun, then you've just improved the gun. That's in my opinion, that's the difference.
Okay. Seems like a good standard.
Yeah.
And our very last question is from Space Cowboy, who says, in today's world, do you think that videos of action shooting sports, 2-gun, 3-gun, IDPA, SAS, etc., are probably most effective tools for getting new people in firearms?
No.
I agree.
I think that people that are pursuing competition videos on the internet are people that are probably either already firearms owners, or they're looking at them because they saw the guns in video games. Those are the two, I think, people that predominantly watch competition shooting.
Shooting sports are not all that entertaining to watch.
Well, the 2-gun stuff more.
I think it's better than most.
Yeah.
But you have to. Some people may not realize, like, you have to have some pretty cool, interesting, photogenic stuff going on to make a shooting competition video look interesting.
To make it watchable.
And remain engaging.
Yes, that's true.
And so a lot of the competitions we do have that. You know, jumping in and out of prop vehicles and crawling under stuff. And we've done enough of the filming that we kind of know what to try and focus on to keep the video interesting, or at least we try to. But a lot of the stuff, especially 3-gun to me, watching those, it's not that engaging. I'm not sure. I would agree with what you said. It's more for people who are already interested than people who aren't. That said, I think the internet and the ability to communicate with everybody is absolutely the most valuable thing going for introducing new people to the shooting sports. If you're a person who doesn't have
he doesn't
a lot
say that though. He says to firearms. Interested in firearms, not necessarily competition.
Well, in that case, it applies even more.
Okay.
If you are the sort of, let's say 20 years ago, if you were interested, if you're curious about guns, but you didn't have any family members or friends who were into guns, it's a hard thing to get into.
Yeah,
like find a range and just show up and see that can be, especially with something like firearms, that can be off-putting to people. Like, I'm kind of nervous about showing up to this thing that I'm not sure about and it seems scary. Well, thanks to the internet, you can learn a lot about them. You can start to get yourself, start to understand things about shooting, and you can find people who may be in your geographical area who are interested in it, who you can meet up with and start to learn and start to experience and practice. And I think that is a massive tool. In fact, I would argue that that is probably one of the leading reasons why we have really been in a renaissance of firearms rights and firearms information in the last 15 years. It is now so much easier for people to find out, and I think it's naturally and entertaining, and it's a thing that is both entertaining, it's fun, it is good physical activity, and it's something that is directly affiliated with civil rights. And I think that appeals to a lot of people, and giving them an easy access to get into it makes it naturally easy to. Now I'm just rambling.
I think I know where you're going, but I don't entirely agree. I think I think the internet has made it more accessible, and the community around that makes the information and transfer of information and these videos to make someone who is interested to be able to garner that ability easier. I do not think those videos, for example, actually garner the interest, which is the question. I think the interest is garnered from. I think you may not agree. I think the interest is garnered from two things. Not all. This is not only. But if you were to say that what things garner interest in firearms ownership right now by modern standards, I think there's two things: video games and movies.
Okay. Yeah.
I think those
hard to argue against that.
I think those are the seed crystals. And then once the seed crystal forms and starts growing, then I think what you just discussed of the internet community, maybe they go pursue videos about competition shooting. Those are the things that make it now accessible. But I think the initial interest comes from that. I think it comes from video games and movies.
Kind of always has.
Yeah, probably.
Smith 29 is only popular for one reason.
Even cowboy action shooting flat out says it.
Literally movies.
They said it came from the Wild Bunch film. Like that movie started cowboy action shooting. I think a lot of this is that way. I know that you were involved in helping with Battlefield 1 or 4 or 7 or
1.
The World War one. I know you helped a little. That's all I'm saying. But here's what I was going with that. Mm-hmm. The game itself garnered a much greater interest in the guns in the game, and you've seen a video boost as a result.
Yes, this is absolutely true.
This is my point. Yeah. So if the video game, people see that even if it is misrepresented in the game, doesn't matter. Misrepresented, it's completely unrealistically represented. People go, is that Colibri real? Right? And then blammo, what's the thing they find? They find the Forgotten Weapons video about the Colibri, or let's say is such and such game like
waste of time. He didn't shoot it. Don't watch that video.
Or they see something in like Call of Duty, a modern game, and they're like, blah, 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 and they find an in-range video about shooting the match with the gun.
Yeah,
the initial interest came from the video game.
That's true.
That's what I think.
That is all of our questions for this time.
All right, guys. Thanks for tuning in to the August Q&A. If you like this kind of content, please consider supporting us on Patreon. It is our Patreon supporters that generate those questions for us. If you can't support us on Patreon, we want to remind you that InRange is only funded by Patreon. We get no advertising money from anywhere. But if you can't do that, please consider subscribing to us on any of our 5 distribution networks. You can find them all on inrange.tv. But most importantly, share with your friends. Thanks for watching.